Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders in the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Ryan Dice, and Rick Cesari. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 28 years. So if you're a company that has software, or product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you can email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today my friend Jason Fladlien. Jason is an expert on sales, marketing, and positioning. He's the host of the Jason Fladlien Show. But he's probably best known for his record-breaking webinars, having sold more than 57.9 million in a launch by effectively using webinars. He is the author of the #1 bestseller book that is considered by many to be the quintessential book on webinars, entitled One Too Many. He has helped countless businesses use and improve their webinars with 6, 7, 8, and even 9-figure gains. I'm very happy to welcome here today my friend Jason Fladlien. Welcome, Jason.
Rich, it's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about, you're well known for webinars, but let's talk a little bit about how you got there, your entrepreneurial journey. Really, how did you start out as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I was a rapper, believe it or not. So I had put out an album, and I was trying to get it to sustain me, at least, at the worst, and at the best, maybe be somewhat successful with it. Go out there and sell my record, and I couldn't do it. Like, I was having all this trouble and challenge, and I didn't understand marketing was a thing back then, not really. And so I generally, if I get my mind made up that I want to figure something out, I attach to it and just go at it as hard as I could. And that's what I started doing with music. I started studying what makes music successful, why people buy it, why they don't buy it, the business of music. And then I got really interested in the marketing side of it. I thought, this is really cool. The only problem was marketing entertainment is its own unique beast. It's way less predictable on what people will enjoy and what they won't enjoy and for how long they will enjoy it. And I'd always been a fan of information. I always liked studying and learning stuff. And so I like the idea of marketing information and selling solutions to problems. And so that's where I started moving towards. So I kind of put my music career on hold. So I'm going to figure this out. And then it's something I've been at for the last 15 years. So what had happened was I was broke. I had no money left. So I had to go and paint houses for this other guy just to make ends meet. So I would try to make money online in the morning and in the evening, and then work during the day. And I got to the point where I'm like, I got to get out of this job before I do anything else. So let me apply my marketing in a way that at least allows me to work for myself as opposed to somebody else. So I started writing articles for other marketers, ghostwriting them. So content for them to use for their own marketing purposes. And that started getting me paid. And that was good. And then I did that for a while. I did that within a week. I quit my job. So I had enough money to sustain myself and support myself. And then I would write articles for the next several months. And I got tired of doing that. But the good news is, Rich, is I got results. I had made some money, and I developed a system for article writing. And so I'd always wanted to create an info product on something. And then it became clear to me I should create it on this because I have this really good system. So I did that. So the first info product that I ever created was a $4 ebook. And I sold it on a forum, because this is back in 2007. Internet forums. This was before like social media even existed. And I took out a classified ad to sell this ebook on this forum, and it did really well. And I was like, wow, because it was only like 6, 7 pages long. And it wasn't, I didn't know how to sell the thing. I barely knew how to create the thing. but people really liked it and they got excited about it. I sold a couple thousand copies of the thing. So I made like $8,000 in a week or two, which back then was a whole bunch of money for me. And people were like, what else you got? And I thought, this is a really simple approach to business. I got to find a very, very, very singular problem, solve it in just a straightforward way, step by step with no fluff, and then sell it at a real low price. And if I do that, I'm like, I got it made. So I did that for like the next 13 months. And then that's when webinars came around. And I was like, okay, now I'm ready to kick it up a notch, start using webinars. And so I did. So the first thing I did was create a product on I said, come to this webinar. If you show up, I'll give you the end result, which is going to be a product for free. If not, I'll sell it to you later. And then that worked out well. So then I thought, can I charge people to attend a series of webinars? And I called that an e-class. And that worked out really well. And then finally, I decided to use a webinar to sell stuff with. And then that was the game changer in my career. And so, $250 million in sales later and an influence on multiple industries. I've certainly left my mark, but it all started really with a $4 ebook.
Well, it sounds like it really all started with a problem and a solution and your own kind of orientation towards like loving to solve problems and create solutions. So,
yeah. And I mean, if you get paid to help somebody and they think they get the better end of the deal, to me, that sounds like an awesome business.
well, absolutely. But it's very interesting to me. It's kind of like you wanted to sell your music. So the problem was, well, how do I do it? And like you discovered like, well, there's this thing called marketing and you sought to kind of create the solution to the problem by learning about marketing. And then you kind of learned about that a bit. You did you created an ebook and you're like, well, I don't know how to sell this. And so you sought to solve the problem of how to sell your ebook. And so again, like problem solution, and you got to learn about webinars. You got very good at webinars, and ultimately, like, so it's interesting that you're so great at webinars because your whole orientation is like problem solution, right? You love solving problems and creating solutions, and so kind of like that's what you've got to be really good at, and that's what you show other people in terms of how to here's a solution for generating sales using webinars.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I do love to solve problems, and for most of my life, that didn't make me that much money. And when I figured out how to adjust it into an environment where it could be rewarded properly, then it was game over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. So let's just talk a little bit about webinars. And this come out from the orientation of like, so someone has a product that they want to launch. And thinking about it, like it occurred to me, like say back in the 90s, people used infomercials. Infomercials gave people the opportunity to kind of capture a customer's attention, like fully demonstrate the product, not just in a 30-second spot, but over a period of time, show results and people who've done really well by using the product, and then ultimately sell the product. Except it wasn't really accessible. I mean, you had to have a good amount of money to buy the TV time for infomercial. But now it occurred to me that a webinar is a way to launch a product, except you don't need to buy TV time. You just need to have an audience. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, there's certainly some parallels to that. I mean, if we think infomercial, we should generally think this very cheesy thing that we see on on commercial, right? And there's a reason for that. They're trying to sell a mass market thing to an audience that's flipping aimlessly through one channel to the next. The cool thing about webinars, beyond just the fact that the production cost and the barrier to entry are relatively low in comparison, is the best webinars I've seen work are the ones that are not mass market type of offerings. They're very specifically pointed at a very specific audience. And if they're done correctly, in my opinion, they have value first. So lead with value. So regardless of whether somebody does or doesn't buy on my webinars, the general consensus is it was time well spent. because there's this attempt first to serve you. And then if you liked how I was able to serve you for free, then you're more open to paying money to continue that service. So that's kind of the whole premise. If webinars are done correctly, the idea, the genesis of a webinar first came from, well, there's these things called seminars and people travel all over the place. And you and I certainly have sat in many seminar rooms together, Rich, right?
Right.
And so this is an online seminar. So what do we call an online seminar? Oh, let's call it a web seminar. Well, that's too many letters. So let's just shorten it to webinar. So it's the equivalent of being able to do a seminar on the web as opposed to in person. And then what I like is you're not limited to 90 minutes for a speaker or 60 minutes or 75 minutes for a speaker. If you want to go longer, in the audience wants you to go longer, you certainly have that ability to do that, and the choice to make how long do you want to go on the webinar to serve your audience. And that's a fun experience to have. But nonetheless, the first webinars I ever did, Rich, I used a mind map. I didn't even have slides or anything. And we were using software back then that didn't allow like Zoom now, you can see me, I can see you kind of a thing. That didn't exist back then. So I had a mind map, and that's all I had to teach and to sell from. And that worked really good, because if you're willing to go live with audiences that nobody else is quite taking care of properly, they'll show up, and then you can serve them first. And then if they like that, then they'll be very eager to say, hey, listen, if I invested with you, what could I get? And so it's just such a value first driven model if done properly. Whereas a lot of other marketing is you take a chance on me and then hopefully it plays out. I'm flipping it. I'll take a chance on you and then hopefully it plays out for me, which I much prefer from a marketing perspective.
Yeah. So interesting. And in terms of going longer and on webinar, like one of the things I learned from you is to stick around as long as there are questions, and stick around just to answer every single question, and then people will continue to buy. So like, what's the longest that you have spent on a webinar answering questions?
Yeah, so we did a 14-hour webinar is the longest one that I've ever done. Special circumstances, don't recommend it, but there are certain instances where we had a finite amount of time that certain opportunities were available, third-party ones that we had contracted out. So we only had the length of the webinar to offer them up to. So the audience wanted to continue to decide whether they should shop or not. See, this is a thing that people make a lot of mistake in business, Rich, is they think people don't want to buy stuff. Everybody wants to buy all the time. They love buying as long as they get the right deal and it makes sense for them. And so that was a 14-hour webinar. We done another one that was similar to that. That was 12, and another one before that was 10. In terms of regular quote unquote webinars, we're just selling one product. I've stayed on up to 8 hours. Usually we go 4 hours, sometimes up to 6 hours. Because if there's an audience and I still have the energy to want to serve that audience, not only point of sale is that justifiable, because we will make sales. But from a macro perspective, it's so valuable because that's how I truly understand my market. That's what I really get to know people and what makes them tick. Oftentimes people won't really tell you what their problems are, or their challenges, or their issues, or their limitations until you've gotten through the first 3 or 4 layers that they've put up for protection. And only after they trust you enough will they become vulnerable with you. And you got to earn that. So it's hard to do that without 1 or 2 or 3 hours in front of the 4th hour. And so that's when you learn the real secrets of a market. So the webinar is the end result of a smart understanding of the needs of the market. That is the action then to communicate directly with the market. But even just positioning wise, the best insights that I've learned on these are the types of products we should create. This is how we should position our stuff so people could understand it, have came as a direct result of hanging on these webinars with 100, 200, 300 people, even 50 people, hour 3, hour 4, hour 5.
Yeah. So it's like you then could take that info and learn from it. Like a lot of times people say that if you want to sell a product, sell one and then duplicate that over and over again. Find out who was the person who bought, why did they buy, and find more people like that and sell to them, right? And so like if you can spend hours with someone and get past their kind of most surface layer objections and get really to the heart of it, you could learn how to craft your sales copy. You could learn how to craft your next webinar. I mean, you learn how to better position the product, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. All that and more. And just how to communicate to that audience what they really want versus what you think they want or versus what they think they want even.
Yeah. And so you mentioned positioning, and so I think you are fond of something that you call strategic positioning. Could you explain a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, totally. Right. So the analogy I always think of it, there's two ways to win more money at poker. Way number one is the way most people play, which is I'm just going to get better at poker. So I'm going to study the probabilities. I'm going to learn game theory. I'm going to learn how to bluff and read other people. And through a lot of effort, maybe it will pay off and I'll win more money at the poker table. The other way you win more money at poker is you just find the tables with really dumb poker players who bet lots of money and don't care whether they win or lose. And then you don't have to get better, but you can get a better result. And so I'm constantly obsessing over how do we take the right, that's a positioning concept there. How do I set myself up to where the reward is as great as it could possibly be while the risk is as little as it possibly can be. Most people just assume that high risk, high reward has to be the way it's set up. It's not, though, you know? And in business, what I really like is business is not a closed game. It's an open game. A closed game would be like basketball, where there's a winner and a loser. And there's literally one winner in the NBA at the end of the season, and there's a whole bunch of losers. Everybody else is a loser. If you make it to the finals and you lose, you are not second place so much as you are a loser. That's what you are. And so I don't like closed games. I like open games where you can define your own rule set, and then winning is determined based upon the rules that you've designed. And so these are all the concepts of positioning. The way that I think about it specifically in business that I think will be most understandable to the most people listening right now is, say you wanted to make a great meal. There's two major things that go into the making of the great meal. There's the ingredients, and then there's the chef. And so I want the best ingredients possible before I ever decide I'm going to cook. Because, man, if I don't have good ingredients, I don't care how good of a chef I am, I'm probably going to lose. On the flip side is if I'm just an okay chef, but I got the best ingredients, I'm probably going to win. So there are certain products that I can't sell that I would love to sell because they don't have the proper ingredients. And it sucks that I can't sell them, and I want to, but these are the 10-foot hurdles that you'd have to jump really high to get over versus the 1-foot hurdles that you just have to step over, to quote Buffett. And so before I ever do any webinar, I am looking to have the greatest advantage. So even if my webinar isn't good, I can still make a whole bunch of money. Other people are typically focusing on how do I make the webinar better? How do I make the webinar better? How do I do this? How do I do that? They're thinking too tactically. And so to me, it starts with a killer offer. We got to have an offer so good, people will feel dumb if they don't buy it. I want an offer so strong that it's more expensive to say no to it than it is to say yes to it. I want an offer that is so incredible that people will feel bad almost when they buy it because they think they're taking advantage of me. And so this is the sharpening of the axe before we cut the tree down. Positioning is the sharpening of the axe, and then the marketing is the swinging of the axe to cut the tree down. And I don't think a lot of thought is played, Rich, to strategic positioning because nobody sees that. They just see the webinar, the end result of strategic positioning or any other marketing vehicle for that matter. And really, I'm trying to set it up so that way I can be average and still get an above average result.
Yeah, no, that's great. And like, I think, like, you know, the analogy of the ingredients versus, let's say, the recipe, right? And
yeah,
it's a lot of times in marketing, people talk about strategy versus tactics. And so it's like, well, marketers will sometimes say, well, it's all about the strategy. The tactics without strategy isn't meaningless. But poor tactics, poor execution, you don't get very far. And like, I've seen you zoom into a lot of the tactics, And it's like, how do you open the webinar? Like, what's the first thing you
Yep.
say? Or kind of like how you pivot from the information towards the sale, or how you begin to pre-frame the sale, like within the content. Or and I'm not giving like doing justice to your actual content with what I'm saying, but the point
Yep.
is, it's like you focus a lot on those things, on those sales, like little
Yes.
mechanisms that can make all the difference. And so you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't execute it well,
Yeah.
then
And so
it doesn't work.
ultimately we want the best ingredients and we want the best chef, right? Ultimately we will move and optimize towards everything, but all in its due time. Like if you give me two products, product A has 5 success stories behind it and product B has 500 success stories behind it, I'm going with product B. That is going to be more likely for me to market successfully because I have more to draw from out of it from the get-go in terms of successful people who've used it. If you give me a product from somebody who's the best expert in the world, but nobody's ever heard of them, and you give me somebody who's pretty good, but everybody's heard of them, right? I'm going to sell more from the person that everybody's heard of versus the person that nobody's heard of. And so these are all considerations that we think of when we sit down and decide in which position we're going to run. The best strategic principle I can give everybody listening here today is this. It's derived from the 80-20 rule. 20% of your customers will spend 80% of the money available. 20% of a market controls 80% of its economics. And so here's where it gets even better than that, Rich. Not only is that true, that 1 out of 5 customers spend $4 out of $5, but 4 out of your 5 competitors are going after the same customers, the 80% of customers, because they think quantity. Quantity is easy to understand. Okay, I can sell to 2 groups. The group on my left, there is 800,000 people. Group on my right, there is 200,000 people. Everybody goes to the 800,000. Look at them. There's more of them. Doesn't it make sense that we go after them? Because that's an easy snap judgment to make to evaluate a market. It's just wrong. Unfortunately, it's fundamentally wrong. So 4 out of 5 marketers are going after the 80% of customers. So only 1 out of 5 marketers are going after 20% of the customers, even though those customers spend $4 out of $5. So I am always looking at the 20% of the market that is going to make the market, and I am serving them. It is a tough principle to swallow, and I will tell you why, because it feels uncomfortable turning your back on 4/5 of a market. Most of us, if we're not, psychopathic or narcissistic, we want to help everybody. And it hurts me to see people not be helped. But when we have limited amounts of resources, we have to be intelligent in how we distribute those resources. And so even though I will say no to 4 out of 5 in that market to help the one I can help, what I've discovered the more I've thought about this is that's actually more impactful too. Because a lot of the market is merely hobbyists, if you will. They have a problem and they want to solve it, but they don't want to solve it bad enough to really take it serious. It would be nice, but it's not something that's critical, right? And so even if you give them the best plan, the chances of them using it and getting a full benefit out of it wouldn't make sense. They just won't. They're not to that point yet. Maybe they will be tomorrow or the next day, and we'll welcome then, right? But we all want to help the people that need the help the most but want it the least. Better is helping the people that need it the least but want it the most. Most of your best customers, they'll buy 5 products that solve the same problem. Because in their attitude, if only one of these 5 pay off, it's worth it. And then you look at the other market over there, it's a miracle if they'll buy even a product at that price point. And then they'll accuse you of being greedy and say, why don't you give it all away for free? As if they are living in the same planet that we are. So strategic principle says any audience you can reach, including your existing base of customers, 20% of them will spend 80% of the money under the right set of circumstances. And so we're always looking at who is that vital few that make the biggest difference. And that's a powerful strategic principle. And we'll extend it, Rich, because you and I hear this all the time from people that are in the rooms that we hang out in. They say, I never attend a webinar. Who even shows up to webinars, right? And they make the mistake to thinking just because they don't, that nobody else does. In any given market, a lot of customers won't come to a webinar. They won't spend 2 hours of their life invested in a single concept related to that webinar. They just won't. I mean, are those good customers? They don't sound like good customers to me. But you take a customer who's absolutely fascinated by the topic and can't get enough of it. 2 hours is just a good start for them. So the function of the webinar by itself helps attract the highest quality of clientele in any given market.
And so essentially attracts the people that want a solution, that most strongly want that solution. They're willing to invest the time,
and they'll pay for it too. I think that's equally important acknowledgement, because there are people that they fundamentally won't pay for solutions, or they'll pay only a certain amount of price, but no more than that. And it's not governed by any logic or reason, right? But these people that are willing to show up on webinars and hang in there and take the education and really dig deep below the surface, those are generally your best customers.
So they're willing to pay. They're willing to pay attention first,
yep.
And then they'll pay with their wallet.
Yep. And I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but the most desperate people will also show up on your webinars. And I like working with desperate people because they're willing to try things out that are not normal. And if you try the normal things out, you generally get the normal results. And so, everybody, like Rich, in the marketing business, everybody thinks that they know advertising because they see it all day long. So therefore, they're an expert from a consumer perspective, right? They don't know anything. They have no earthly idea. But in their head, they're a good advertiser. Now, what happens if they start spending money on advertising and then they fail miserably they just run through their budget, right? Well, then they might listen a little bit. They might be open because they're now feeling a little bit of pain. But then they'll generally go to the first, second, and third lines that are easily available to them. And then they'll learn stuff about like institutional advertising and brand type based advertising, not direct response sort of stuff. And that's more palatable. It's easier to swallow and digest, and it feels more comfortable, right? But they still ain't probably going to do what needs to be done, and they're still going to continue to struggle and have bad results. And then if they don't give up, and unfortunately a lot do give up, those that don't give up, now they're willing to set aside what they think might work and be more open to what actually does work. And then those are the customers that are coming on. Those are the types of people that are more open to it, right? It's a tragedy that most people don't start taking their health serious until after they have a major health scare, right? But that's just the way that it is. And so those are the types of people that are going to show up and pay careful attention because they have more at stake if they get it wrong. And so these are some of the indicators of these really qualified audiences that I like to serve and like to help. They're so receptive to it that when you combine their receptivity with going that extra mile to figure out what truly would make a difference for them, that's where the magic happens.
I love it. And speaking of really qualified audiences of people that are invested in a solution, so we're part of this mastermind called Driven, that is co-led by yourself, Perry Belcher, and Kasim Aslam. And so you got a bunch of people that are really invested in marketing solutions and willing to not just commit a good amount of money, but a good amount of time towards like really like learning and finding the best way to kind of to tackle the marketing in their business.
That's right.
So you want to talk a little bit about Driven?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a $25,000 fee just to get access to Driven for a year, and a qualification of minimum 7-figure a year business, ideally more. Most people have more. And it's just serving another need in the market, right? So you can serve it all the way up. So you might think on the surface of it, it sounds silly. Why would a multimillionaire want to make another $1 million? The reality is, why wouldn't they? That's the thing they want more than anything, almost. In some instances, it's the only thing going right in their life, and everything else is pure chaos around them. So it's their only outlet of sanity.
Yeah,
But
it's a game that they've discovered that they're able to win, so they want to keep winning and win better
yeah,
and win bigger.
yeah, or it's the only place they feel like they can contribute, which
Mhm.
is a whole different conversation that we can have. But nonetheless, there is a segment of the market where being number one is just a good start, where there's your potential, and then there's the gap between where you're at and where you want to go, and you want to close that gap, right? Or on the flip side of it is you want to experience growth because you feel like you have something that's so important that you want to get it into even more people's hands. And when I sell, I have that kind of mental picture, Rich, where I'm like, I'm trying to sell to somebody who's drowning in water right now, and I'm throwing them a life preserver, and they keep kicking it back. And so somebody asked me, Jason, how do you stay on these webinars so long? I'm like, well, listen, if I'm throwing you something that will save your life and you keep kicking it away, am I supposed to give up after the first time or the second or the third time? I'm gonna keep throwing that son of a gun. I'm just gonna keep at it till you figure it out that I'm here to save your life, you know?
Right.
Uh, and
And
so
like, does it matter if you're like, does it matter if the person you're throwing the life preserver to might be annoyed that you're trying again and again? That they,
right.
like,
Yeah,
does
yeah.
it
They're
matter
they're
how you
complaining.
look?
Right. They're complaining about it while I'm trying to save their life, but then they finally figure it out. Or if not, they say, all right, fine. I don't know, but I trust you enough to know for the both of us, you know?
Right.
So some of us are like that when we just want to continue, we have a good thing and we wanted to get into more people's hands. And so running a mastermind like Driven, it's now normalized, but there was a period in time, and I saw the market shift where nobody thought anybody would ever pay $25,000 to be part of any mastermind or any group for that matter. And then somebody figured it out, and then everybody followed suit as they generally do. But our attitude here is, the advice I give a regular business owner about marketing or about webinars is mostly front end loaded. It's like steps 1, 2, and 3. The advice I give to people in Driven or to hire more successful business owners is more like steps 21, 22, and 23. This is where a lot of what I can do, Rich, I can't teach, unfortunately. It's too sophisticated and it's often overkill to solve the task at hand, right? It's like they don't need a bazooka, they need a fly swatter. We're swatting flies here. We're not going into war, kind of a deal. But what I like about Driven is we are encountering situations where there's not much effort needed in order to take the momentum that already exists and expand on it. And so that's what Driven does. And it just goes back to show you, like, I'll teach webinars to 2 different groups of people, and I'll teach 2 completely different approaches to those groups, calibrating to those. So those at the beginning of their journey, those in the middle of their business journey, and those that are at a highest level possible in their business. And they need webinars, or they need an improvement on a webinar. And even one improvement in those instances can make a huge difference. And so we're really ultimately, once you master something, then the game becomes, in what different ways can I communicate it to different audiences to have different amounts of impact and then get monetized fairly as a result of having those impacts. So Driven is just another place in where I feel I can be worthwhile. I can show up and I can contribute. And the effort involved for me, Rich, to contribute is very low, and the impact is very high, and the money's really good too. So I'm excited, and it keeps me sharp, man. I'm always seeing new things come down, and it's always making me want to step up even further.
Yeah, it's a fantastic group, and I really appreciate everything that you, Kasim, and Perry are doing with it. I mean, one of the cool things, a cool little bonus of the webinar are the calls on Wednesdays, where kind of we get to talk about the stuff like what we've been talking about on this webinar, and answer people's, solve people's problems, really. I mean, those calls are just amazing. And, obviously I'm a big fan, I'm part of it. And I just, want to express my appreciation for everything that you do and all the time you put into it.
And it wouldn't be as good as it is without you there as well, Rich. So
Cool. Thank you. I mean, on that note, so if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
yeah, the best way is to buy my book. So it's called One to Many. I'll just right here, One to Many. It's on Amazon. best place to go to get it. That book is the result of a $5,000 per person seminar that I did on webinars, where I taught everything I could possibly teach inside of a framework on how to create and launch webinars. And so then we took all that material and turned it into a $10 Kindle book, or $20 if you want to get crazy and buy the paperback version of it. So go to Amazon, get One to Many, and it'll break down very specifically, step by step, exactly how to create what I feel is the most universally applicable style of webinar to a majority of businesses. And what I've discovered, Rich, is most people tell me it's just a masterclass in persuasion. So even if you don't plan on doing webinars, I would highly recommend you read it, because the thinking, the strategy, the positioning, and some of the philosophies of selling and marketing that I've discovered, they're just dripping off of every page of that book.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I mean, it's a great book, but it's kind of the first thing that I said about you is that you are an expert in sales, marketing, positioning, but you're best known for webinars. Because it's true, like the things that you are expert in, that really lead up to the execution through webinars. But it's like we've had conversations just about really specific sales techniques, a really specific language in sales, and that's all necessary for webinars. And you teach all of that in your book. And so it's kind of like webinar is a vehicle of delivery. But it's like mastering those things is what you teach and what you teach in that book.
That's right.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Jason, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this podcast, and I'll see you at the next event.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate you very much.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.